I'm a jazz man. I realize I'm saying that like Daniel Plainview at the beginning of There Will Be Blood, but I haven't mentioned it that much in my videos, but maybe in passing. Recently, I think I did. When I was a teenager, I was at a conservatory learning how to play drums, and my teacher was a jazz guy, a really great player. And I think I mentioned in that semi-recent video that whatever it was, that I basically lived through the plot of Whiplash, as noted by one astute commenter. But yeah, very much in the jazz spirit today because things are all over the place, and so I was freewheeling to various favorites of mine on the way home. And even the recording of this video was delayed by quite a bit because as I was sitting down to start recording, then Better Get It In Your Soul by Charles Mingus came on, and I was like, well, I can't turn this off, and I was grooving through the whole thing. I really love Mingus. I think he's probably my favorite. I connect to the whole Angry Man thing. He was the Angry Man of jazz, and I used to have the nickname the Angry Man by those nearest and dearest to me. And then, as soon as that song ended, I was like, okay, time to record. And then Hora Decubitus came on, and I was like, whew! I was saying that out loud, God damn, and I made me realize how much I miss playing in a band. Yeah, so it reminds me of how in competitive Pokemon, people often say, oh, there's one right way to do things. And I think that's complete nonsense, just like it's complete nonsense in jazz. There are wrong ways to do things, to be sure, but there are also a lot of right ways to do things. And I think focusing on the one right path is pretty silly, pretty narrow-minded. Ultimately, you gotta have feeling, but you gotta cultivate that feeling. Your innate feeling is not enough to get you through everything. So, feeling is kind of what we are going with today, because I think the feeling that team tournaments are the only worthwhile ones that has permeated the community is quite a shame, but it is a very widespread one. Now, when I was first getting into competitive Pokemon back during the Jazz Age, then individual tournaments were a huge deal. They were like the biggest deal, but there weren't that many team tournaments. For a long time, the only team tournament was the World Cup of Pokemon, and it was a big deal, a huge deal, an enormous deal. So many legends of the game took place during World Cup, but individual tournaments were looked at just as seriously, and if anything, looked at more seriously because they're individual. I'm not saying people didn't get help. But, it is an individual achievement. It seems obvious, but stick with me here. Now, the development is that I went through this personally, where I was feeling burned out on competitive Pokemon, and then I got drafted for SPL 3 in 2012 at the mid-season. And I had so much fun playing with my new team, just hanging out with my new team. I was pretty young then. I was one of the younger players on the team. So I was getting along with these older players, these players I looked up to, and it was a great experience. And it was so much fun. I was like, previously I thought I was on my way out, but now that I've had this incredible team tournament experience, well, I want to do that again. Then a few months later, I signed up for World Cup, and that was just as great an experience. And for a long time, it was just SPL and World Cup, and then the Snake Draft came around for the lower tiers, and now it's named the Smoking Champions League, but basically lower tier SPL. I never really had as much affinity for that tournament because it came around in Gen 7, which was past the time where I was really interested in, other in the other tiers, and the current gen, sure, but not so much as I would have been excited for it during the days of Gens 4 or 5. But you get the idea. Team tournaments are great because you get to. It seems so obvious now, but I promise I'm mentioning this for a very good reason. Because this part I feel like is not so much there anymore, and it's really weird. So, in case you have not had a team tournament experience where you just make a bunch of new friends and have a great time, then that's basically what it was and what the appeal was. And I was far from the only person. Like, almost everyone I knew had this kind of thing. Oh yeah, I was getting kind of, sick of Pokemon, but then I had a great team tournament, and, now I want to stick around. just for those almost. Or even the parts of the tournament schedule, the tournament year, that don't have a team tournament going on, I stick around because of my friends I made from the team tournament. You get together on a team, the shared goal with a bunch of people you don't know, and then you get to know them really well, and it's fantastic. You know how many Pokemon friends I still have from being in a team tournament with them over a decade ago? So it's a really joyous thing. And then there were some people who would come for the team tournament and then disappear. They would come back for the next team tournament, or they would just come back from SPL or World Cup or whatever. The experience is so fun that even if Pokemon isn't really your thing, as much as it used to be, if the flames got out a little bit, then coming back and being in that team environment will reignite it for you. I mean, you don't even have to play. You can just, this is why people end up to manage for so long. They just love being around the team. Now, obviously it was not all sunshine and roses. Team tournaments tend to bring out the worst in us in a lot of ways. I've mentioned so many times on this channel how a lot of the time it's not about the game as much as the spectacle. But at their best, then the team tournaments are about the human element as much as the game. It's not just getting together to circle jerk with your friends, as it used to be called, and now it's been shortened to jerk forever. So I'm gonna get that out of the way now because I'll probably refer to it later. Yeah. So nowadays, half the fun of the team tournament, or always the fun of the team tournament, we just didn't used to call it that back then. The fun of the team tournament was jerking with your friends. It used to be called a circle jerk as a pejorative, but then people leaned into it, and now it's just let's jerk. It sounds weird, but I promise it makes sense and is normal, at least relatively. So, that's what I forgot to mention for the intro. My favorite jazz tune, which I have placed in the pinned comment for your enjoyment, is a semi-recent discovery, only last year. It's, I'd known Pharoah Sanders for a long time, but I found this track on this compilation album he did called Africa, and he has the opening track on it. It's called You've Got to Have Freedom, and it is the most extraordinary thing, so I placed it in the pinned comment. Anyway, back to it. Snapping my fingers just like I was during that Mingus binge earlier. God damn. Okay. Yes, so you're jerking with your pals, and it's a great time, and when you're jerking with your pals, you're in a better mood, therefore you like focusing on the Pokemon more, right? So everything's just firing on all cylinders. It's like a band that is just in tune, and you're feeling it, and you're picking up what the other person's doing, and you're going further with it, and then they pick up on what you're doing, and they go further with it, and you're building your advance, and someone steps in and says, hey, how about that? And you're like, that's great. And you go over to Black and White or Oris or whatever, and you say, hey, how about this? And they're like, you know what, I'll give it a try. And then you keep going and going and going, and then you have a great team, and a happy team is a successful team. And you could have teams, this happened so many times, teams of superstars, one after another, and they just cannot get along, and then the motivation drops. I mean, Pokemon players love to bitch and moan about how they don't have the motivation, which is really just an excuse for them to, in case they lose. If they win, great, they look great, because, oh my god, look how fucking good I am, even without being motivated, which, by the way, is literally a post that has been made on the Smogon forums on at least 2 occasions, to my recollection. And if they lose, well, I wasn't motivated. What the fuck do you expect? Nothing motivates me anymore. The game does it. So that's all bullshit. But if a team isn't excited to play for each other, then there's that intangible factor just won't be there. You're going to not have that extra drive, starring Ryan Gosling, to really go above and beyond for your teammates. Now, that teammate factor is why team tournaments eventually eclipse the individual tournament, because in an individual tournament, people would start fucking around and bring in dumb stuff for whatever reason, oh, I can't look like I'm taking it too seriously, so I'll bring a stupid team, and if I win, I look like God, and if I lose, then I wasn't trying because I brought this inferior Pokemon, obviously, so, win-win. Really stupid. But then there was also the fact that, you go too far at a tournament and you're on your own, and eventually you just, you snap a little bit, and suddenly bad things start looking really good. And then you go, why did I bring that? But, it happens to the best of us. It has happened to the best of us in the most important circumstances so many times. Yeah, but in team tournaments, in individual tournaments, you theoretically can fuck around and do whatever you want. I don't think you should because it cheapens the competition. But the thing is, individual tournaments have been so devalued relatively that it's almost like, oh, it doesn't even matter. Whereas in a team tournament and other people are relying on you, that's when the pressure is really there. Because obviously you don't want to be the one letting down your teammates. You're not just playing for yourself. Therefore, team tournaments are taken the most seriously because everyone's really bringing their best, and the pressure's on and all that jazz. So that's the basic idea. But it used to be, for a long time, the individual tournaments and team tournaments kind of lived in harmony, and both of them were taken seriously. But ultimately, individual tournaments were a bigger achievement because they tend to have more skill-reliant formats. Not one and done stuff and elimination and a bunch of other things. But best of three, sometimes double elimination. A long qualifying period for things like Smoke and Tour or the ladder tournament or Classic and Grand Slam. Actually, almost all of them. So you had to qualify to even get there in the first place before the playoffs would show up. And then you had to make your way through the playoffs, obviously. And the fact that, yes, you would have help, but you generally would not have as much help as a team tournament, I don't think. Because in a team tournament, you would often have a situation where, like, the entire team pitches in to help you. And with an individual tournament, at least in my experience, it's the way I always did it, and I know a lot of other players did. You had exceptions like CL, who was incredible and just, did everything themselves. But they were the exception. And most people would go... I mean, of course, there were people who just got fed entirely, and of course, that's nonsense, whether it's individual or team. But most of the best players, they would go largely solo, and they would, message their friends like, "Hey, what do you think of this team? What do you think of this team?" And then they get advice. So I think that's generally, a world of difference from your average team tournament back in the day, anyway. Where obviously it's a team tournament, you're there to help each other out. But of course, it becomes more of a team effort, right? So, I'm not sure exactly when the shift took place, but I've noticed for several years now, I feel like, and actually, it's not even a feeling. I have seen it stated in plain English, and sometimes in not English, depending who's talking, but in plain spoken language, I guess not spoken, but in in no uncertain terms, that team tournaments are the only important ones. And what the hell was that? Oh, I think my washing machine. Okay. My dishwasher, sorry. Yeah, so people now, the general opinion is that team tournaments are valued more. Before, it was more like, oh, people prefer team tournaments because they're more fun. You get to be with your friends, okay? So, like, everyone can participate. You don't have to go far in an individual tournament, to be invested. And you're not really on the outside looking in. You're participating, even if you're on the bench, let's say, or even if you're managing and you don't play at all. But it was still acknowledged that the individual tournaments, are the biggest deal because... You get the idea that I'm trying not to repeat myself a million times. The other day I said, sorry, I'm trying not to say three things at the same time, and the person I was talking to was like, no, do it. Anyway, so eventually this shift came, I guess because people... I don't know if this is accurate or anything, because again, like great cinema, I don't profess to have all the answers. But the shift seems to have come, at least my theory, personally, is that people preferred the team tournaments, therefore they're what was cared about more, therefore they became seen as better. It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, I guess. If everyone only cares about them, then they're the ones that become more skill intensive, or not skill intensive. They have everyone coming out to try harder. I don't even think that's true because obviously, anyone who's ever won an individual tournament or even gone far in an individual tournament knows how much effort you have to put in. But the perception is at least individual, whatever, impressive, who cares? It's what you do in the team tournaments that matter because there are other people Actually, there was a really weird discussion in the DPP Discord the other day where, and I don't know, the person had some issues clearly, but it was like the whole thing where individual tournaments are like okay. The person literally, I said, because I still was arguing about God, the voices aren't even in my head anymore. But yeah, and I said, so what do you say to like all the people who won incredibly challenging individual tournaments? And the guy said like, oh, nice work there, bud, or good job, champ, or something condescending as hell like that. And this is a player who had not accomplished almost anything. And I was like, how do you say that so confidently, so arrogantly? It's just so dismissively. And he's like, oh, well, if you're not playing for other people, then it doesn't mean shit. And I'm like, this is not the only instance of this, basically. I think this was an extreme example, but generally the idea is like the individuals, they're fun, whatever, but the teams are the ones that really matter. So I guess the shift kind of came from everyone prefers them. Like I said, everyone prefers them, therefore, they're valued more highly, and therefore because they become valued more highly, then I guess they, wind up being more competitive. But I don't even think that's true, because it is well documented how the not just because of best of one, but just how SPL can be as full of nonsense as any other tournament. You could say, oh, well, people are generally less motivated early on in individual tournaments, whereas everyone is giving their all from the beginning of SPL, which I don't think that's necessarily true. But you even see this in arguments about like best of one versus best of three. It's like, oh, well, I coast in the early rounds of individuals because I don't care as much. I'm like, well, that's your choice. You don't care unless it works out. I don't know. Because in individual tournaments you can take it very seriously from the very beginning if you're really trying to win. As opposed to the I'll see if it works out or not kind of thing. So and that's exactly what I mean. It's the value judgment. Then manifesting in the form of how it actually plays out, and then changing the reality. And I'm sure there's many parallels you could draw from that. But again, like SPL, yes, everyone's trying their hardest from the beginning, and it's handpicked for the best players or whatever. But that doesn't mean that there aren't plenty of players who shouldn't really be there. There are plenty of overstretched player pools, with no disrespect to them, of course, but sometimes there just aren't enough players to fill the 10 teams, the 10 slots, and you wind up. It doesn't even have to be one of the players that probably wouldn't get selected in a more competitive pool. It's just the fact that dumb stuff happens because Pokemon players are human in team tournaments, even with the pressure of their teammates, theoretically enhancing their performance or whatever it is. And then we get into this whole thing where the team tournament sheet and all the evil it has brought. I don't know. Where people just look at the records over a series of best of ones for you. Yes, obviously, good team tournament performances are legendary and amazing, but I don't, I have no issue with that. It's more the complete diminishing of individual tournaments, where that tends to be the overarching narrative that I've noticed, at least. I don't know, maybe I'm off the mark, but I've seen so many people. Again, it could be, a loud minority or a vocal minority as opposed to, the silent majority but I don't know what the silent majority is thinking. I used to. So this is just me going over where I think the shift took place 20 or early 2020s, I think. I couldn't put my finger on it more precisely than that, but yeah. Oh well, here come the Germans outside my apartment. Okay. Yeah, that's basically it. So we're gonna finish this replay, and yeah, I don't know. I think individual tournaments definitely they feel more, I don't know, forgotten nowadays. Like, you can have all these impressive performances in the individual tournaments, which, are incredible feats. And it's not like, one player who cares against a bunch of people who are just dicking around. It's like people who are, that argument that was had before. It's like, what are you even playing for if you're not playing for teammates? And I'm like, yourself? And this seemed like a foreign concept. And then I got into a really weird ethical discussion. And without going too into detail, actually, I probably... Have you ever had someone, no, I won't go into it. But sorry to be elusive, but it probably wouldn't be fair. But yeah, you should play the game for yourself and your own enjoyment of it. And if you enjoy team tournaments, obviously there's nothing wrong with that. I myself have. Oh, that was what else I wanted to mention. I myself have come back to SPL twice, this year and 2 years ago, to play because I was looking for that team tournament experience again. But here's where it gets kind of weird. Because I remember SPL as this full-on, great social experience. And, if I just wanted to play Pokemon, I'd ladder or, join, another individual tournament. I specifically, wanted to jerk. Excuse me. So, yeah, it's going to sound great out of context. But, I was looking forward to the social experience because that is, a big part of the appeal. So many people, like I said at the beginning, so many people do this. They come for the Pokemon and they stay for the people, right? It's great. But, and I don't know when this shift came around because, I stepped away from, following this sort of stuff super closely a few years back. But the shift seemed to be, oh God, how do I even say it? Previously, you would be talking to your SPL team or your World Cup team constantly, just because that was the fun of it. Not just to discuss Pokemon. Obviously, at first you would discuss Pokemon and you would obviously, of course, but then you get to know them as people, and then you talk to them as people, and then that's the fun part. That's the part you really remember, even if your team doesn't win, which is often going to be the case. Then if you had a great time with your team, then it was worth it, right? Me and my buddy Roscoe, we remember some of the SPL teams we were on. We were like, yeah, we didn't win, but remember when this happened and that happened? That was a great moment, right? Making fun of our teammates, insert stupid thing that happened, whatever it was. Even if our season was ruined by insert traumatizing thing here. But now, in recent years, it feels less and less like this. And I don't know what the shift... my theory, I've talked to a couple people about this, is that, people have gotten... I mentioned the circle jerk thing, right? And now with... I don't know... This is more prominent, maybe because it's Discord, but it wasn't the case on Discord for a while. I don't know. But now it seems like everyone is so comfortable in their own private circle jerk, that they don't feel the need to talk to their SPL team. Kind of in that way, why would I talk to other people? I already have friends. Or here's a horrible one. Why would I talk to people at work? They're just my coworkers, And it's like, human connection, man. I don't know. I don't know if it's like a Gen Z antisocial thing. I don't mean to, rip on Gen Z, not by any means, but not for this anyway. But if they're puritanical cinematic viewings, then or viewing habits, that's another thing. But the rise of Gen Z neo-puritanism is really, really something. My dad is a major Puritan, and it drives me crazy. And I'm like, I thought we were supposed to be getting away from this. Anyway, but yeah, it's not just the Gen Z players either. I mean, there's some stuff that's strange about that. But, I see even the people my age or older, it's like it feels like they don't feel like talking to their SPL team because, they've got their own jerk for talking. And the last couple of SPL teams, it's not all dry and bad, obviously, but people just seem completely disinterested in talking to each other. And I'm like, I had the horrible feeling that I'd basically signed up for an individual tournament where I happened to be playing with other people. And I was like, well, at this point, why not just play an individual tournament, if you're... I don't know. I'm sure there are plenty of other sociological factors at play contributing to why why people are less interested in just talking to other fucking people. Who knows? But it's weird, people you see on Discord. Oh my, this pissed me the fuck off, actually. There was one player on our team this year who was talking constantly in the Smog Tours Discord, the general tournament Discord. He's famous for, never shutting the fuck up there. But he would never talk in our server. I'm like, well, you're clearly on Discord all the time, which is fine, by the way. I'm not ripping on anyone. We have our phones in our pockets 24/7. Nothing wrong with it. But you're on Discord and you're talking 24/7, so why not talk to your fucking SPL team? And it's like, I don't know if, the player base isn't growing enough, and it's just, and everyone knows each other at this point. I don't think that's true, but what? Everyone knows each other at this point, and why bother? Or I don't know. There were like new players too who they didn't even talk Pokemon in our server. They just prepared in their own private server, which that one was not so bad, I guess. I don't know. It was weird. Yeah, you can't bet. And the funny thing is, the team that won SPL this year had an amazing social environment. From what I heard, they had so much fun together. But I was talking to other people. I was like, "Hey, was your SPL team like this?" And they're like, "Yeah." And a couple years ago, it was the same thing. So it seems weird that just people seem... I don't know. I didn't mean to veer off like this. But the lack of... I don't know. Yeah, I guess I'm kind of going in circles at this point. But... Yeah, it wasn't just a bad draft or whatever. Even teams that were doing well, just didn't feel like talking to each other. I don't know. I guess another factor might be the player base is older on average now. When I was first getting into it, we were teenagers or largely teenagers. Someone who was like 23 was already on the older side, relatively anyway. But. It was usually like people would come around during advance. They were still around, in whatever capacity. But man, yeah, I guess what I was the thought I was collecting was that yes, we're older on average now, but again, like I said, we've got our phones in our pockets and we're on Discord. That's clearly an interest. It's just we're choosing not to talk to the people in our team tournaments or on our teams in these tournaments. These tournaments, which are supposedly the biggest deal for us, and I'm just like, what is the actual appeal? Is it like I don't want to be left out, but I don't actually feel like participate? I mean, I often have the feeling that, it's like, you just want to participate in the show without actually participating because, you don't want to get ripped on by the Smog Tours crowd. I don't know. It's kind of going off in different directions at this point. Shocker, right? Just like jazz. But, yeah, man, it's weird. Like, I really guess I'm going in circle, so I'm gonna cut it off there. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.